Welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about is related to building enduring great companies. And I'm Kevin Lawrence, and I'm joined here today by my co-host, Brad Giles. Hey, Brad, how you doing?
I'm really good today. Just come off of 2 fantastic days with a new client, building strat plans. It's been amazing. So I'm pumped.
Well, you know what? I am, but for different reasons. I just came off 5 days at the lake. I'm in the middle of my summer vacation here. And so we've had time being pumping up tubes for the kids to ride in the lake and having a great time on our in the sunshine. So it's pumped for different reasons.
Good.
So what do we got going on today? What's our focus or our topics for today?
Well, today we've got something a little different. Normally we're going through a topical and a timeless, right? So we're talking about something that's happening in the world and then some kind of timeless concept. Well, today we've had a pretty cool event, the 2 of us this year, that we both attended virtually. And we want to talk about that. So today we're going to talk about Jim Collins singularly, and we're going to talk about some of the amazing concepts that he's gifted us, and also how we use them or how we've seen them work really well with clients specifically. Because let's be fair, I don't know about you, I would have to say he would have to be, if he's not the top living thought leader of our generation who's currently alive, he'd have to be in the top 2 or 3 or 4. He was definitely up there in terms of people who help people in the mid-market. The rigor of his data, the durability of the concepts are fantastic.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you look at it in the work that we do with our clients, he is the number one source of the best insights, tools, and concepts that we use, particularly the concepts. His concepts he's developed are absolutely amazing. And there's other great thought leaders and experts out there, but nobody has done the research he has done to find not the theory or the opinion, but really what was the foundational principles that were different about the enduring great companies. And, for those of you that read his books, they're great. And we've been fortunate to do quite a few different events with him. In particular, this one we just did, there was many people around the world having an hour with him. And those of you that were there, it was great. And then some breakout rooms discussing questions for him, and then him going back and doing an hour Q&A. The insights and tools are powerful, but we battle tested this stuff. And, we've probably had 6 or 7 groups of 20 CEOs we've taken to his lab in Boulder, where he just comes alive and it's just unbelievable. But each of those CEOs that has been there has come away with their marching orders, and CEOs don't take marching orders from many people, maybe aside from their board. But the way he, in a workshop environment, explains these things is outstanding. And so that's all good. But when you go back and apply his principles in growing companies, or companies that even they get messed up and get stagnant, you apply his principles, things get better. They are battle tested, and we can give lots of examples, both of us, of how we battle test those principles in different companies and different cultures and different countries and different economies. And the root of a lot of the work we do comes from him, because it's almost like a map or a guide of how to get to greatness, if you have the discipline and determination. And challenges. Most people don't. A lot of people don't have that, but it's just outstanding. So yeah, and the event was it's just awesome. Every time you get to see him share, and I was outstanding. And we had lots of clients there who it gave them a bit of a boost and a refocus on what's important right now.
Yeah, so there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 people on this virtual event. He was in a TV studio. The event was hosted by, I think it's the Growth Faculty here in Australia, right. But there was people from India to America to South America, all over the world. And I guess to kick it off, one of the things I loved was, it was nothing new. It was Jim, and that was good. Jim was talking about his concepts. And he was talking about things that you and I know we've battle tested. I mean, I've been doing that for years and years, as you have. And we know that this stuff worked. And he really just went in and went over it and detailed it. But it was good because it demonstrated the rigor of the concept today.
Yes. Well, that's why you said the key word you said, it was nothing new.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't be. Business and the dynamics of business don't change that much, right? There's certain trends that come along, but at the core, it wasn't new because it's not supposed to be new, because it's not the flash in the pan idea. It's enduring. And the whole idea of enduring is not a lot new.
Yep.
Just it continues to get stronger and stronger. So let's I am a massive fan of his. I've had the opportunity to meet him a number of times and be a witness to his amazing work, both in big groups and small groups. And I remember one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard him give, interestingly, outside of his book. But we were in London, England. The group of the growth faculty, and Karen, the founder there, is a great friend, was doing an event with him in London, England. And I brought my son with me. So we had a small group of CEOs afterwards in a forum kind of concept, and people were asking him questions and doing a Q&A. It was awesome. Of course, he's always awesome. But I was able to bring my son in, who was 13 at the time, and another CEO had brought his son, who was 17, and they got talking, and they asked the question, well, what's your advice for young people that want to be entrepreneurs? And in typical Jim style, he sat and thought about it for a minute. Like, he really thinks about things. And he's like, you need to study greatness. And if I was to give advice to a young person, it would be to read 100 biographies. Because that's where you get the tracing or the breadcrumbs or the trail of the patterns of greatness is from great people. Yeah. And he says that would be your best thing. So 100 biographies. Now, my son has not gone on to do that yet. He's still got, a bunch of work to do. But that's just, it's such simple, powerful advice on almost everything. And he generally likes to ask questions versus give advice, but that was a very specific question he was asked. So,
but it's timeless. I mean,
it is.
That makes me think about Good Will Hunting, believe it or not, right? Good Will Hunting. Okay, so Good Will Hunting.
Was that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck? Yeah, that's right. That was the first one they wrote, I believe.
And Robin Williams.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Robin Williams is the professor. Okay, so they're in the studio, and the professor, Robin Williams, is challenging him, and he's saying, why don't you get out? Why don't you go and do something? And he says, well, I'm standing on the greats. He said, I read all of these books. Now, he used it in another way, but the point is that he said, I read all of these books. I've got Aristotle standing next to me, telling me, advising me in my ear, knowing what to do, and all of these other great and amazing leaders. And so I think it's timeless wisdom, and it's
timeless wisdom that people don't follow. Great people do it, but majority of people, it's they don't. So if you go back to some of the stuff we talked about, which we'll get into in a minute, yes, it's timeless wisdom, but do you do it right? And that's it, because it's work and discipline and uncomfortable to get great and do the things that you really want to do to that high standard that's required.
Yeah. And that's really one of the things that you and I do is discipline, right? We bring a new level of discipline to leadership teams. And so
Absolutely.
much of what Jim Collins does is about discipline, about focus, about stop doing things. Like one of his concepts is the stop list, right? Figure out what you can be the best at, and then stop doing other things. It's a really
It's
simple,
so that you can
powerful.
maintain your focus on the things that matter, right? So it just as a side note, one of my passions I've talked about before, a passion you and I connect around is motorsports. And we were out at the go-kart track yesterday, and my son has competitively raced, and I did a little bit. I did more car stuff, but we decided to get new, race go-karts. And these things are violent. I mean, it's closer to driving an F1 car than any car because of the intensity. And we're out there, and we have one of the best drivers in the world, a young guy who is an outstanding professional driver out there, luckily, and helping us get our carts set up and coaching and mentoring us. And he was giving me a lot of stop doings. Like I'm generally pretty fast, but I can't keep up with my son anymore. And he goes, Kevin, and he was giving me because, you lose speed because of what you are doing. So you need to stop doing things. So he goes, Kevin, you got to get smoother with your hands. He goes, when you do this in a corner, you slow the cart down. You got to get to the point where you can just hold it and barely touch the wheel. So basically he's saying, stop doing this as much. Yeah. And it's a natural reaction when the thing's twitching around to do it, but you got to learn to be smoother and hold it. And so it's a combination, Brad, of, things like stop doings and disciplines to learn from the best. So in the karting world, in the car world, I always try to learn from the best and bring those disciplines, and all of a sudden your performance gets better. And it's the same in what we do. But when you're in the middle of it, it's hard sometimes because you can't see it, or you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's human discipline. It's human nature to avoid discipline. The human mind, it's lazy. It intuitively wants to find the easy way out, but equally it's on the opposite side. It's creative. Like, we want to be creative, and the human mind doesn't want to maintain discipline. The human mind wants to think, oh, look at that over there. Maybe we could go and see what that is. And that might be fun to do, because I'm bored with that thing, this business that we've built.
And there are some people that are great at it, but as we know in the work that we do with companies, is that we are a monthly discipline and focus reset and a quarterly hardcore discipline, not even just in terms of focus, but to have debates and to really, one of Collins's principles that I use almost every meeting is confront the brutal facts. And you know what? Sounds so confront the brutal facts. 4 words, but they're game-changing words. And I had one
I do
of the
too.
companies.
I do the same thing.
Always. But do you know that if we're not running those meetings in some of the companies, they won't. And what I found is because the brutal facts are a little awkward, they're a little sensitive, they're a little touchy. Sometimes it leads to brutal conversations with brutal consequences. And, a team recently, I've got, I get my clients, and I know you do too, to get very comfortable putting them on the table, discussing them, debating them, working through them.
Yeah.
And one company that I worked with is not there yet. And I ran a session with them this week, actually, in the middle of my holidays, because they're a critical client and they really needed it. And I just set the tone to have more debate. And the CEO and I had a plan just so that, because they got really good people, but they're not confronting the brutal facts. I was almost wanting to sidestep them. And once you lose that discipline, you don't want to deal with it because it's awkward. So anyways, I just set up some conversations and we had a ton of amazing debate about brutal facts. It was an awesome meeting. But what a lot of people will say is if they don't naturally have the trust or the discipline of doing it, having somebody else in the room, it's almost like a facilitator or a marriage counselor. It's easier for people to get those brutal facts out and have the conversation because they know if it starts to go down, because some CEOs are really good at managing those and some it's not natural. But no matter
dynamics. It's the dynamics. I've had people say to me, you know what? I've been waiting 4 weeks to get that brutal fact out when we'd run that exercise. It's been in the back of my mind. I knew the quarterly workshop was coming up, and I can't bring that up with the CEO, but it's this environment that's created where you go, okay, well, what is it? And as a facilitator, I'm sitting there and I'm going to just, and it's great with Zoom because you go, my Zoom isn't frozen. I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for you to reply.
But it needs this. It needs the space, both the safety of the space and the airtime for that stuff to come out. And it's incredibly important. So that's Collins's principle of the brutal facts, which he talked about, and that's how companies thrive in these times. But it is not easy because people by nature, it takes a lot of discipline to do that, and people shy away from it. And by the way, Our egos are generally quite happy if people aren't bringing us the brutal facts. Quite
Oh
happy
yeah.
in the short
Because
term.
everything's okay.
Because you're awesome, I'm awesome, we're good. Which
We've
is
got
what a
other
lot of
problems that
people.
we need to worry about.
Yeah. Oh, look over there. Oh yeah. No, it's the leadership team. Oh, we got a problem. Or it's so and so. And that's why the brutal facts piece is a real, it's a real big thing. I know Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel. I don't remember if he was founder or not, but CEO of Intel for many, many years.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called High Performance Management or High Performance Leadership, one of the two.
I think
Anyways,
it's
one of the
management.
things that, high performance. So one of the things he talks about is someone he calls a helpful Cassandra. And he said that on every team he was a part of, he wanted a critical pain in the rear end, always. Because as the CEO, everyone's afraid to challenge you. People are terrified. Even as facilitators, people can be terrified of us because they're afraid, and their job security kicks in and they don't want to look bad, whatever it happens to be. But he always made sure he had somebody who would always openly challenge his thinking because he knew his thinking wasn't great.
Yeah.
And he knew that challenge would make it actually better and make him more effective, make his ideas more effective. So he knew that, and he was smart enough to make that happen. By the way, if you hear his dog barking in the background, that's my kid's dog.
Is your
in
dog
the other
barking?
room. My kid's dog is barking. Yes, we tried to set it up so we'd have a quiet room, but I don't know what my kids are playing with. I don't know what's going on.
All right.
We'll deal with that later.
We'll leave that in because that adds a bit of spice.
It adds a little bit of character. Yep, it's the lake house adventure. But the helpful Cassandras were important and for a lot of people, and that's why the root of debate. You got to have the brutal facts, get them on the table, but then you got to debate them and work through them, and it's super, super important. It's just it's hard. It's very hard, and it's a muscle, and if you lose the discipline, it's work to get it back.
Yeah. So picking up on something that you said then, so often I've had people say, look, I was really quite worried and anxious coming into this, to this meeting, not about the brutal facts, but just what's going to happen and am I going to be called out? And it's really strange because what you've done is you've made us feel really comfortable. It feels like it's kind of the opposite to what I thought it would be. I thought it would be, people would be getting really upset and angry and would be, there'd be a high pressure environment like that. It's pressure, but it's in a really different way. And it's like a really safe space.
But that's a testament to your facilitation skills, Brad, because as a facilitator and a coach, you create that space and you have to protect it relentlessly to make sure that when people do bring the stuff up, it's a positive experience. So they do it again. And if you're not in the business of judging people, and well, there's always some judgment, but if you're not just there to make people wrong, if we're to learn and grow and improve from whatever is going on, if that's the intent, they're generally good conversations. Now, unless you have a scoundrel who's stealing or lying or doing something funny in the system, like that. But generally, you can work the stuff out. You got to have an environment where there can be enough comfort and trust and willingness to work through stuff. And when people start to exhibit bad behavior, I don't know about you, but I stop it pretty quickly. And generally, when we're in a room facilitating, the amount of bad behavior goes away a lot because they know they're not.
I'll tell you, it's a very quick story. I remember there's a friend that we have called Les. Okay. Les,
good guy.
A good guy, fantastic facilitator. Been doing it for a long time. I've got the most respect for him. So I was in a meeting one day with him, and I was a delegate, not a presenter. He was facilitating the facilitators, a very interesting and challenging job, right? One person walks into the room, sits down at the back of the room. We're all around a C-shaped table at the front of the room. He sits at the back and sets up his laptop and starts typing away. And I just drew such wisdom from this, or I just got so much, because he stopped and he looked at him and he said, can you please either join us or leave the room? Because we can't have this room dynamic work where we've got a person at the back who's on their laptop, who's got one ear on the conversation, but isn't a part of the meeting. And yeah, it's a testament to, I know that Les was a facilitator at IBM for many years, very successful there, and has gone on to build his own successful business. But it's just great when you see someone like that, who's a master, come in and just control that situation in such a wonderful way.
A nice way. Yes. Because you could have done many things, including ignore it. But now you're breaking the environment that you're in. It won't be as effective. Yeah, it's interesting. And one of the things, a tip for everyone listening, if you're not doing it, is to establish those rules up front. Because when we go into companies, there's a lot of bad behavior, including people being on their phones or computers all the time. Oh, yeah. Every company we work with is different. It depends on their culture. But I've got one group, and we've got one guy who's a co-founder of the company. I love the guy. He is awesome. And he is so distracted. So we have rules that are almost just for him. And which is, you're not on your computer in the meeting. And if you've got something to do, like we say, you're welcome to leave the room. If you want to go do something on your phone, please, get up anytime and leave the room unless it's a critical point in a conversation, which will reel you back in. But so I'll have things, and I'll look over him every once in a while, or I'll walk over, I'll put my hand on his shoulder. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, we're having a meeting here. What are you doing? And we have fun with it. Like it's not a, because it sets up the environment to do good work. And
I don't know what you're here to do. I'm here to build a great company. And right now, this is the most important day in the next 90 days that's going to set us up. So if you're replying to an email about something completely irrelevant and unimportant, I think you got your priorities wrong. Now, I'm not saying that to them, but you get my point. That's the tone that you're trying to set.
It is. And that's why we will sometimes put the phones in the middle of the table. When I was, one of my clients in the Middle East, when we'd have meetings, if you touched your phone, it was 100 dirham penalty, which is about $30 US. And the chief legal counsel generally would put between 300 to 500 dirhams in the pot every single time. He couldn't help himself, and it was hilarious. But it's creating that environment that allows you to do great work, and that alone, just laying the foundation, it's really, really important. And it's basic. So in many of the companies, we will come up with some guidelines of our meeting basics. Like, what do we commit to doing? Right. And whether it's making sure you really say what needs to be said, phones or technology off, which is massive. It's very easy to get absorbed in it. But kind of rolling back, so as Colin's principle that we use, confronting the brutal facts, is massive. The other principle we're touching on is from, and every time he talks about it, I laugh because from his book, How the Mighty Fall, I'll get to in a second, but he's got the 8 behaviors that leaders of companies that are going towards greatness have. And then the corresponding habits they have, like the opposite habits they have when they're basically driving a company into the ground and destroying a company.
The doom loop?
It's something, it's not that, well, it's related to the doom loop, but it's 8 behaviors. And I use it as an assessment. Yep, I use it as an assessment. But I'll come back to that. But the funny thing is, so one of the sessions that we did in Boulder with CEOs, he offered ask us about our favorite book of his. And I'm the only one generally that says How the Mighty Fall is my favorite, because it is how great companies implode and destroy themselves. Anyways, and he mentioned this on the session earlier this week about how it's one of his favorites because it's his almost like his trip onto the dark side.
Yeah.
Because although the rest is about the positive side, and this is like basically what not to do. But so in that of the behaviors, one of them is confronting the brutal facts versus hiding the brutal facts. That's the first habit of those 8. But there's another one in there is called autopsies or autopsies. Autopsies? When you look at when someone died. Autopsy. Okay. Thank you for the pronunciation. And even it sounded good in Australian.
Australian accent. You'll be right.
Yeah. Autopsies. So autopsies without blame or autopsies with blame. So interesting is that it's when you do autopsies with blame, you're going to create an environment, first of all, where you're blaming rather than learning.
Yeah.
right? You're blaming people. When you look at yourself, you have to learn and get better and accept the growth that has to come from that. And for him, the autopsy with blame, the other side that I've seen is that it shuts down a team, because if everyone's going to get blamed when they make a mistake, then people are less likely to come to the table with the brutal facts or the mistakes. And when we do this assessment on teams every year, just as a health check, the correlation between their performance and the health of the company and the assessment is insane.
Yeah.
Insane. It's about as a direct a correlation as I have found, because those behaviors just lead you either, they lead you to greatness, or they lead you to destroy the company.
Yeah.
So it's tied into the way in which you debate these situations, which sets a whole tone for the team.
Absolutely. I begin every workshop with like the second slide. It's confront the brutal facts, no shame, no blame. And the third one, which I don't remember right now, it shows you how much I pay attention when I present a workshop.
But the other thing that we do is that we often, through interviews or polling people up front, we flush out things like the brutal facts.
Yeah.
So that it gets it in people's mind before the meeting, so it's more likely to come up in the meeting. You come in cold on that kind of stuff, and it's harder to get the best out of people. Anyway, it's so darn important because.
Absolutely. The quality, I stress this so much. The quality, I provide a lot of homework beforehand, right? The quality of the plan that you walk away with at the end of a strategic planning day is absolutely correlated to the preparation that you come in with.
Yes.
Okay? Because otherwise what's happening is you're sitting there on the day and you are asked a question such as, so what do you think we should do about X? And then you look up at the sky as if you're going to get some divine intervention as an answer. And the first thing that pops into your head is the first thing that you say. Okay. But then after the day, you go away, and a week or 2 or 3 later, you go, geez, that doesn't really seem like a very good idea now. And that's why.
Because you only had 27 seconds of thinking around it.
Yeah.
And then you land versus some time. Like, it's important to let things think, and some stuff you can do instantaneously, but some deeper thinking on stuff, it can be really helpful, really. And there's this balance, obviously, between giving people too much homework and not enough homework. There's all kinds of things around that, but allowing people. So Colin's, one of the sessions we talked about, he had a brilliant thing around brutal facts.
Yeah.
Which is, you should figure out the brutal facts, but when you want to dig into one, it's like, well, what are the facts about the brutal fact? Because people will go to brutal fact, but then they start having brutal opinions. And opinions are really fun, and they're really interesting. They're not consistent with doing great work and and building a great company.
Yeah.
So he says, once you get the brutal facts, how do you stay in fact mode to unpack the fact and to really get to the core of it? We had a fascinating one. We had a CFO that was a wonderful man, but quite weak in one of the companies that I worked with. And the brutal fact was around the finance team and their performance. Well, most people don't want to criticize someone openly in a room. He's a colleague. He's a loved colleague who wasn't performing, and hence his team wasn't performing. So, but it was the brutal fact in the company. The finance team was holding the organization back because we were flying blind. We didn't have the information we need. So we went and listed the brutal facts. That was the one we needed to address. So we did breakout groups. And in the breakout groups, we went and listed all of the facts about that brutal fact. And you know what? Facts don't hurt that much. Like, opinions are lethal. They're like punches to the head, bullets in the heart. But facts are not. So we went through, and then everyone laid out all of the facts. He even had a beautiful list on the team he was with about listing all the facts about, I forget the exact words about the finance team not able to deliver. And because it was facts aren't judgmental. Opinions are very judgmental and very painful. So we had like the most, and I have to admit, I was a little nervous because it was such a sensitive subject. And I really love this guy too. So we had this whole list of facts to which
Yeah.
we then could go have a great debate about prioritizing them and what we really needed and how we could go about it.
Yeah.
But normally, if you didn't have that as a fact-based discussion, and you're just going to go and basically criticize the finance team and everything they're doing wrong,
No.
it's going to be a trauma for the CFO and the team, and it's just not healthy. So, and that's one thing that I learned from Collins is that you gotta boil down. Once you're in facts, facts are safe, facts are healthy, and most people are horrible at facts. They think
Yeah.
they have facts. They've just got opinions with numbers thrown in or something. It's it's a wonderful way to have healthy debates, but
That's
it's
awesome.
a massive discipline.
Yeah, that's awesome. How I'm normally dealing with the brutal facts is we're listing them as a team, we're working on them, we're discussing them. And then I'm saying, so what's the real issue here? Okay, so we can see, so to your point of the finance team, someone raised it, 2 or 3 people might raise it in a leadership team. Okay, so what's the real issue here? And if the people are expecting the question, it gives them a license because they know that I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm not going to let it go.
Yep.
Okay, but what's the real? You've said that, but what's the real issue? And you can kind of dig it. And I don't know if it's as effective actually as the way that you just mentioned. What are the facts about the brutal facts? But I've found
it's another layer that will improve the conversation, because getting to the root is good, but you can still stay in opinion mode.
Yeah.
It's easy to, right? And I will tell you, my own growth as a leader, coach, facilitator, whatever person, has been getting to the facts and learning the distinction.
Yeah.
I remember I got burned once. Prime example, and this is in the market right now. 08, 09, when the market was really bad, I was doing some work. I remember being in the Middle East, and people are saying, look, companies are laying people off like crazy. There's tons of talent in the market. This is a great time to hire and improve the strength of our team.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. But then when you start digging into it and getting the facts, well, first of all, you're reminded when companies lay people off, they do everything in their power to keep the A players. Everything in their power. So it turned out that there was a lot of people in the market, but there was a very low percentage of talent in the market.
Yeah.
Talent being A players. So, but everyone's like, there was this assumption, and we were one of the companies, and we made a mistake, and we came up with a quarterly priority around hiring, and we were going to try and hire from people in the market that have been laid off and all this stuff. But in the moment, it sounded amazing. Nobody had any facts. The only fact we had is that people were laid off. But there was an underlying assumption that there would be a high percentage of talent, which there wasn't. There was a very low, because then at the end of the quarter, we talked to the HR people who were doing the hiring.
Yeah.
And they were saying, yeah, we've interviewed a ton. There's very, very few really good ones. So it's a prime example of these opinion fests and meetings that sound very persuasive. But when you excavate underneath, you're like, yeah, there's nothing there. Or, oh, that theory is built on swampland.
What's funny when we're talking about the brutal facts, when I started doing it, I don't know, 5 years ago, whenever it was, I started doing it with leadership teams. I came across the concept and I was playing with it, went in there, and I dedicate like 15 minutes, half an hour to it in the day. And then what I was finding is it was such a powerful concept that they were saying, look, at the end of the day, they go, look, the brutal facts component, that was really good. But, we feel like it's a bit unresolved. And when I've heard that enough times, I've started to dedicate more time and even leave an open area to it. And I've had to go for like 3 or 4 hours where we've been on this out of a whole day. Like it can be such a powerful concept. And it's almost liberating for some of the people, because it's like we're working through, this is the real issue. This is the real
Otherwise, we're going to talk about, the shade of paint in the boardroom is, it's off white, but I'd like to see more white than the off. Like you end up talking about trivia because you do. You like, obviously not that one, but I had a team for years. They were 5 partners in a business, and I ran their monthly meetings, 90 minutes a month. because they would talk about the color of the paint and the weather and and like nothing, because it was way too uncomfortable. Good people, like good people. And we would do the brutal facts because we would talk about that up front. So then we knew what the heck to talk about.
Yeah.
Aside from reviewing where they were doing on a monthly basis, because they weren't talking about the right things. And that is and because if you don't talk about the right things, those things usually get worse and they come around and bite you in the rear end. And so this would tie into something we've talked about in the past couple of weeks. And it is one of the most important things, because then you're really, really having the right conversations. And if you do, all these brutal facts can be addressed as long as you get them early enough. So it's an insanely powerful. Now on that, just to be clear to other people, we start our meetings by talking about wins and progress.
Totally.
So we do, there's a lot of positives, and it's very easy in business just to get caught in negative. We're trying to build a great environment and a team. So we start off by talking about wins or highlights in the last quarter or last month, whatever it is. So we, gets a great positive energy and gets us thinking about the things we're doing well before we go and get self-critical about how we're going to improve. So just to be clear that it's not, not just a brutal session. We got to, as leaders, we have to set the right tone and energy for people too.
Yeah, well, you can't get there unless you've created a safe environment that we spoke about earlier. So it all, it's all architected to get the results that we need, for want of a better term. We've got to create the safe environment. We've got to, I think it's actually really important to talk about, what have been the wins in the last quarter? What have been the losses? And this is one of Jim Collins' concepts as well, from Good to Great, I think. No shame, no blame. So we're not here to shame people, and we're not here to blame people. We're here to build a great company. I'm working on the assumption that the people in the leadership team are A players. That's why you're in the room. And
they want to get better and better. Yes.
Yeah. Because of that assumption, I'm not going to shame or blame you. I'm going to say, all right, well, sometimes things happen and we couldn't do it. Or maybe there was a problem. Like, number one, what happened? I don't believe in any excuses at all, but what happened? Explain the situation. And then from there, let's move on, and let's really, let's use this as a teachable moment.
Yes. And when you say move on, let's make sure it's fixed situationally, and then we've got a better approach for the next time.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. Like the thing that I've learned, I was on a call earlier this week. I've worked more this week than I had planned to, but another very important call from one of my clients overseas, and that I've worked with for many, many years. And he brought up something I'd said to him years ago, and he had a CEO in one of his companies. And I said to him, it's probably going to cost between $20 to $50 million for this person to become an effective CEO. And he remembered the 50 million number.
Yeah.
And we were joking. So he said something about, I said, he goes, well, we probably spent the 50 million. So I'm expecting great things now. But it's very expensive. You have to make a lot of mistakes. There's a huge amount of learning required to be great at anything. And I did it, that basically for 100 million to be effective at running $100 million business, it's going to cost you at least $20 million to become an effective CEO. And that's assuming that you're a founder. 20 to 50. It's probably closer to 50, because that's over probably a 10 to 20 year period it takes to get there. It is, and that's of accountable cash burn, not hypothetical. Like, really, that mistake, there's 2 million. Oh, there's 5, there's 100 grand. It's part of it. So as long as you're getting the learning from it, it's fine. And it sounds crazy to say you're going to blow 50 or 20 million, but you are. Just let's get the learning from it, so you don't keep making those same mistakes. And I bring it up because he was reminding me of it, and we were laughing about it because it shocked him the first time I said it. But he goes, "It's right. That is what it takes." And even to be a good executive, it's easily, depending on the scale of the company, easily $1 million, a couple $1 million in mistakes as well.
So let's go back to what Jim Collins said to your son. Read 100 biographies. You reckon
Yeah.
I could turn the 50 million burn into a $30 million burn if I read 100 biographies? Just made that number up, by the way. Yeah, like,
Maybe not. You could probably get a better return for the 50 million, i.e. you could be more effective and build a greater company. Maybe. I don't think, like, the thing is that there's theory and there's practice. You can do the theory all you want. So you might be able to, Brad. I don't know.
yeah, we don't know. We're
But what I don't want
speculating.
people
I
to believe,
appreciate that.
I would rather people believe they're gonna make the mistakes. So when it happens, they're less ashamed, and they're more motivated to learn from it.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
because you have to, like, again, I'll go back to the racetrack metaphor. You know, we had 3 friends. We all have very similar driving abilities, and when we get together on the track, I mean, we can't keep up with my son, but when we get on a track, it's mayhem.
Yeah.
And we had, and we were going to the maximum that we possibly, and, we had 2 pretty good crashes yesterday. My car ended up partially in the air. Another guy ended up, crashing into the other guy. It's mayhem, but we're pushing. So we know all the theories, but we're still pushing so hard, and we're learning like crazy, and you're making mistakes like crazy. So maybe you could, but I would rather people think that they're going to make a ton of mistakes and learn from it. Because otherwise you can, I think, sometimes I may have even myself played too defensively on some of this stuff.
Uh-huh.
And, yeah. And then people feel like they feel horrible when they make those mistakes, we want them to learn, but maybe.
So
But
what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing is that you definitely learn from other people, but when you learn through pain yourself, it cuts deeper and the scar is broader.
Yes. Well, listen, we could learn how to fight against Mike Tyson by reading books and watching videos. We could, but that ain't going to be the same as being in the ring.
Getting punched in the head. Yep.
I can learn all I want about boxing, all I want from watching videos. And I'm not a boxer, but I can learn all I want. But and there's a story that my dad was a mechanic, and he tells a story a number of times. He came up again a couple of weeks ago where he was a mechanic and he had a neighbor who would read the books and always liked to fix his car himself. And at one point he was trying to fix the car and he was so angry. He said to my dad, he said, "Norm, I am done with this car. I don't want it." My dad said, "Well, I can fix it for you." "Nope, I'm done. I've been reading these books and blah, blah, blah." So, and he gave the car to my dad. So my dad goes into the guy's garage and does this thing for about 20, 30 minutes, fires it up and drives it home. And my dad's a genuine nice guy, so I'm sure he offered for the guy, and the guy, I don't even know if he took it. I think he ended up giving, like, my dad's not the kind of guy who would take it. I don't remember what happened in that part, but the point of it is that all the learning we do gives us more all the reading and stuff gives us more data and more understanding and more context to anything that's going on. Like, again, I go back into the go-kart world. I can listen to a tire, the noise it makes, and understand what the driver's doing, right? And the professionals even more so. So it gives you more context, but there ain't nothing like being in the middle of it doing it, I think. So either way, the learning is the learning, and you definitely can accelerate it, I think. But you'll probably still make the same mistakes if you're pushing appropriately, and maybe not. I'm happy to be wrong, but it's helpful. What I do know is that you have so much more understanding of why something happened and how to fix it. So
before we wrap up, I want to ask one more of his concepts.
Yes,
the flywheel.
Do the same thing. Great minds think alike.
The flywheel. So let's maybe explain the flywheel, and then he discussed it, and we've used it with clients. It's a fantastic metaphor for the accelerated momentum that you get in a business through focusing relentlessly on disciplined mechanisms over a period of time. So the way that he describes it, and I'll hack it and I'll do a terrible job, but I'll try to do it as good as I can. I'd appreciate if you could correct me. or support me. So imagine you go into a factory and you go up to a huge flywheel that's much larger than you, and you reach up as high as you can, and you put all of your effort in, and it moves an inch. And then you put more effort in, and it
Yes.
moves 2 inches, and then more effort in, and then more and more and more effort. And you keep putting all of your effort in, and eventually it does one complete rotation. And then as you keep putting more effort in, it begins to go through its second rotation, and then slowly but surely it begins to spin faster through 2 turns, 5 turns, 10 turns, 20, 100, 1,000 turns. And as it gets faster, you need to put less effort in. So the metaphor is that is your business. If you focus on the right things, you get the simple mechanisms within the business, let's say 3 to 6 key simple mechanisms, and those things should lead to the next thing. So if at the 12 o'clock position, for example, we've got for Amazon, let's say.
So Brad, why don't we just let's talk about the benefit of the flywheel, and then we'll talk into how we get it going more. And one of the things I look at is getting the flywheel going, as you're describing. It's like an airplane taking off in the jet engine. The jet engine spools up and almost nothing happens. It's just sitting there on. And when they hit the throttle, the plane goes faster and faster and faster. Almost nothing happens. Nothing happens. And it feels like it's not going to take off. And then all of a sudden it starts to lift. But there's so much energy getting planes off the ground. And I heard once, and I don't know if it's true, but a huge portion of the fuel, huge portion, is from just getting the plane up to that 30, 40,000 feet. I heard half. I don't know if that's true. Please don't quote me on that. But it's the amount of energy to get a plane off the ground. And initially it feels like it's never going to work, but you have just to keep doing it and have faith. Once it's up in the air, it takes less energy. You can hear the engines back off, and those things can actually glide quite a long distance without fuel. But the idea is that effort to get it going, and some businesses never get it. They're always scrambling like crazy, like the plane full throttle down the tarmac. And so the idea of the flywheel is that it becomes so good as these things feed, it becomes an uncontrollable force, almost to the point where people want to find a way to stop you because you're so powerful or so effective. And when you see businesses that have a flywheel, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's what creates it's a powerful force for growth. So it's amazing. And once that thing is going, it's like almost like nothing can stop it, like a runaway locomotive, but in the positive sense.
I think the really important thing that I draw from it and work with clients on is the word momentum. So you get more momentum the more that you do, the more that you feed it, the more momentum you get. But the second part is, if we execute one component, we can't help but execute the second one. It's going to naturally get to the next one.
It's almost like if you, I'm at the lake, so I'm thinking the lake. If you jump into the water, because you jumped into water, you're going to get wet.
Yes. Yep.
Right? It's like because you do one thing, the second thing almost automatically happens.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of the flywheel, is that executing one thing brilliantly, you automatically get the next thing. So and generally in the concept he shares, it's 4, 5, 6 things. We execute one thing, which means we get the next thing. And what happens for a lot of companies, and it is, out of the private sessions with him, it is one of the most powerful things people walk away with, and everybody wants to do it. And we've done it with many companies. He wrote a book called The Flywheel, a little mini book. What does he call it?
Monograph.
Thank you. And just on this, but it's insanely powerful, because most companies that we've gone through and done this, first of all, it's a tool to help make sure your strategy is right or set your strategy. But most people have gone through it and they go, no wonder. Yeah. Like, no wonder our business isn't performing, because we got this thing and we used to do. Yeah. We realized it's part of our flywheel and we haven't done it. So I'll give you an example. One company, without sharing their name, but a very successful company in North America, one of the aspects of their flywheel was product sampling, getting people to experience the product. And they had an acronym for it and everything else. I don't want to get too specific. And they would do community events. And even in their stores, there would always be sampling within like 10 seconds of entering their store, there would be sampling.
Yeah.
And at community events, they would do, runs or kind of health oriented events and have product sampling. Well, that was I think it was the number 2 thing on their flywheel, because it brought all kinds of new people into the business, or for people that were inside the stores. And so that brought people to the store, or people that were in the store, they experienced new products. Well, what they had realized, and this was a massive insight, when we went through in the flywheel and we looked at how much were we investing in each of the pieces of the flywheel, they had not only underinvested in terms of spend, they had dramatically underinvested in terms of where they hired people.
Wow.
But yet it was like one of the most important things. They had neglected the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And that was once we saw the fly, we're like, yeah, this is awesome. But we had them go and rate each in terms of performance and investment. It was shocking and almost embarrassing, because it was so darn simple. They forgot one of the key tenets of their business. And of course it was slowing, because you're only as strong as the weakest link in your flywheel. And it was,
you know what? But they forgot one of the key tenets of their business. But let's look at it through another lens. They uncovered what was holding their business back from gaining more momentum.
Absolutely.
And that's why we do what we do. Okay. It's so that we go in, just like the brutal fact, we go in and we kind of clear away the weeds, and we move the business to the next level. And that's, I can probably think about 3 or 4 flywheels I've built where we've had exactly the same thing. And they're dumbstruck by the simplicity, but also we've been missing these 1 or 2 or 3 really important things. Because I would say to them, is this component red or green? Is it performing or not performing? Similar thing that you're doing. And then they're like, wow, what, how have we gotten this far? This doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. And another company that we were at, the red or green, like we talked about, another company that has multi-locations. I think they have 9 locations around the country that they're in. And we use the flywheel in our planning sessions, and we color code them red, orange, or green. And the team pre-does it. The head of the location pre-colors the flywheel. And we see where the flywheel's stuck. And in the locations that are doing, again, we've tested this in lots of companies, so that it's an insanely powerful tool if you get it right.
Yeah.
But we can see with a location where it's stuck and where we need to invest. And then we correlate that with the plans that the head of the location has to make sure they actually got the right plan. Awesome. We evaluate their strategic thinking through their flywheel, and it's uncanny. It's unbelievable. So it's not easy to sort out, because you're really trying to find out what is it. And some businesses will have a product flywheel. Some businesses have a people flywheel, or a customer flywheel. There's all kinds of different approaches. And the last thing I'll share on is we can go on about flywheel forever, but one of the CEOs that I've worked with for years came to one of the private call-in sessions. And again, they spent quite a bit of time on the flywheel. And after we got their flywheel locked down, when he sold his business, his words, not mine, that they got an extra $200 million in the sale price of the business because of the flywheel. An extra 200. Because they believe that the way that they articulated the strategy of the business was so clear. Internally, and we kept repeating the flywheel internally again. Whenever the CEO would talk, he would always bring up the flywheel.
Yeah.
And so everyone internally understood the strategy that made the business tick. And the investors that wanted to buy the business were really clear on why the business was successful and how it would continue to scale.
Yeah.
So again, by nature, I get excited about these powerful, simple concepts because they work.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine that. But if you don't understand what's really making your business work, or said differently, if you don't have a flywheel, you got to do a lot of manual labor forever to keep this thing going. And you'll be always fighting, trying to get revenues. It's unbelievable. And when you go and even if you get the flywheel wrong initially, and then you go over quarter after quarter, you look at it and you change it to find what makes it work,
Yeah.
It's just awesome. And, look, we could, Jim is an outstanding, beyond his research, he is also an outstanding human being, and he's a force for good. He's a force for trying to help people to build great companies and doing it in a way where you're making a better impression on the planet, right?
Yeah.
Making money is amazing, but being, purpose-led and these other concepts like BHAG and all these other things are, anyway, it's outstanding work. And I feel incredibly grateful to have him who has done this research so that we can take tested, proven models to the clients. And if you don't, he talked about something at the session about bullets versus cannonballs, which is doing micro tests versus big, bold moves. Big, bold moves is for Hollywood and, the cinema. That's not how people are successful in business generally. It's almost always little tests, the most successful companies being risk adverse. And so anyway, he talked about, bullets versus, and how you got to do tests just to test your ideas out, because it's almost like theory is interesting, but it often doesn't work so well in the real world.
We need to validate the idea.
Exactly. Thank you. Validating the idea. And he made a comment, and I just absolutely loved it. He goes, but you've got to validate your validation. He says, if you shot a bullet, but it's almost, and he didn't use it, but it's almost like if you shot a bullet, but you didn't do a good job of shooting it, it's not a valid bullet. So it's basically, if you took a bullet and you tried to throw it at somebody or throw it at a target, pardon me, more appropriate, throwing at a target, that's not good execution of a bullet. So any data you collect is not valid. Yes. You have to relentlessly execute the bullet if you're going to use it as a validation point. So that means you got to have some of your best people or your best thinking behind the bullet if it's going to be something that helps to prove out a strategy or an idea.
Well, on that note, bullets before cannonballs, maybe we should move to close. What an interesting conversation we've had talking today about, let's be fair, unashamedly our favorite thought leader, arguably one of the greatest thought leaders living today, who we use all the time in every single session that I know we both do. So thanks everyone for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers. I'll start again. Thanks for listening. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast with Brad Giles and Kevin Lawrence. For the video version, you can go to YouTube, the Growth Whisperers. And to reach me, Brad, you can find me at evolutionpartners.com.au. And if you'd like to find Kevin, it's at lawrenceandco.com. So with that, we'll bid you adieu and we'll look forward to chatting to you next week. Have a good week.